So sugar is notorious for promoting weight gain, tooth decay, etc. Yet there is a much more sinister role that it plays in sparking and enhancing every disease known to man. University of California, San Francisco states, sugar in the amount consumed today poses a health risk contributing to a minimum of 35 million deaths globally a year. So I want you to get this into your head. So we put warnings on the side of cigarettes, but we're not putting warnings on the side of sugar. Now this is a conservative estimate, by the way. We didn't just write this down. This is after long analysis and realizing that there's some statistics that go up to 50, 60 million people a year. Now, these are two local boys here, and you're going to learn about them at this point. These are two of the people that are most contributing to our sugar consumption in this nation and around the world. So, Fanjul brothers are among the largest sugar producers in the world and control the sugar industry in the United States. They own about 12% of all land in this county that you're in right now. And this is a gigantic county. If I get on one side of this county and drive 60 miles an hour to the other, it will take me 45 minutes to an hour. If I get to the ocean and drive that way, it takes me about an hour. And they own 12%. And what do they do at that 12%? Grow sugar. They give large donations to all politicians so they can manipulate law. They were behind preventing the use of stevia, which is a viable health-supporting sugar alternative. Many countries in the world now where you basically have stevia is illegal to sell. So the sugar industry literally forced government officials in those countries to say you can't sell it here. And the propaganda that they were literally using for this was gut-wrenching, sickening. They were actually saying stevia was causing cancer. And if last days before we were about ready to lose the use of stevia in this country, the soda industry walked in and saved it. It was the only time they did anything nice as far as I know. Now, fruit and sugar. Hybridous fruit of today has on average 30 times more than its ancestral origin. Now think of this. So why is what I would consider the original fruit or one of the original fruits or foods of man problematic today? Because it's been hybrid to have a minimum, an average of 30 times more sugar. Human pancreases have been so taxed over the last several generations due to the consumption of processed sugars. They've actually gone on strike, whereas enabling sugar to go directly into the bloodstream, promoting disease. So we always use the term blood sugar applicable to low and high blood sugar, diabetes and hypoglycemia. But why sugar is bad in the bloodstream? It feeds bacteria and viruses and molds and cancers. In the 19th century, only the aristocracy consumed processed sugar. It is estimated that these individuals consume no more than 1 kilo, 2 pounds of sugar per year. And they actually had a piece of furniture in their homes that had a lock and key where they would bring it out on Christmas, Hanukkah, their birthday, some special event, take morsels of it, and then lock it back up again. Ironically, today, sugar subsidies have the poorest members of society consuming the largest amount of sugar. Isn't that amazing? So it completely reverted in a century to the poorer you are, the least educated you are, guess what? You're going to consume more sugar, because those foods are chock filled with sugar. It's pretty grotesque as far as I'm concerned when I was a little boy and many of you were growing up and your children, that they literally put half of the baby food with sugar. For the baby wasn't an addict when they came out, you're the addict. So if basically the mother tasted the baby food and she got excited about that, guess what, the baby got that particular brand constantly. Meanwhile, society's most affluent relish the privilege to make intelligent choices. So those of us who basically know better, quote, we're consuming a bit less, about 120 pounds of sugar a year, versus the lower income, less educated culture are consuming 160 pounds a year. But believe me, 120 is no party. Now this is what we see every day, and we don't think much of it. That's incredibly insane. I go to affluent malls and walk around, and here they are, people walking around in $500 dresses feeding their children soda. What's up with them? Years ago, I was on the board of directors of a local school, and they asked me to come in and teach nutritional courses. Most of the families in that school were from Ivy League colleges, and literally they didn't have an interest in this. They were interested basically in finding out how they could get well-educated kids, but they were actually helping to precipitate disease and premature aging in their children by feeding them McDonald's and sugar foods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is so ingrained, it's sad. Our children on average consume double their weight in sugar per year. Now think of that. And today the kids are bigger, so how about if you have a 120-pound child? That means they consume 240 pounds of sugar a year, average. Some may consume 300 pounds. Now let's just watch what really goes on, and I'll explain this slowly but surely as we go through it. This is cellular respiration, how cells harvest energy.
The process of digestion results with carbohydrates and other molecules being removed from the consumed food
So carbohydrates
and transported into the bloodstream.
are consumed from food.
From there, nutrients, like the carbohydrate glucose, will leave the bloodstream through a capillary wall and enter a tissue cell. Once inside the cell, cellular respiration will completely oxidize the glucose molecule,
So here you are,
releasing
respiration
high-energy
of the
electrons.
cell, oxygen.
The overall goal is to make ATP, a storage form of energy for most cells. Cellular respiration is a four-stage process that
So
begins
the
with
ATP
glycolysis.
is actually stored energy.
Glycolysis literally means splitting sugars, and it is the first step of cellular respiration, occurring in the cytoplasm of the cell. Glycolysis consists of two distinct phases, an energy investment phase and an energy harvesting phase. In the energy investment phase, two ATP molecules transfer energy to the glucose molecule, forming a 6-carbon sugar diphosphate molecule. This molecule splits, and the energy harvesting phase begins. During this phase, the two 3-carbon molecules are converted to pyruvate, and ATP is formed. Glycolysis is a 10-step reaction that involves the activity of multiple enzymes and enzyme assistance. In the process, a net of 2 molecules of ATP,
I'll explain this all to you.
2 molecules of pyruvate, and 2 high-energy electron-carrying molecules of
We have a lack
NADH are
in
produced.
this.
When oxygen
Most
is present,
people are not
the
producing
pyruvate
enough of this
molecules
to process
and
the
NADH
sugars out.
enter the
And
mitochondria.
so we have
And the
the
next
sugars
stage
staying
of
inside
cellular
of the bloodstream.
respiration begins.
So the difficulty that we have is that our biochemistry, our body's chemistry, is so skewed at this point that it doesn't really know how to break down sugars. And you're giving a totally an unreasonable amount of sugar to the body at this point. Now remember, up until a century ago, most of us would only get sugar through eating food. And a minuscule amount would come through eating the food, and not processed food, and not sugar, and not high amounts of fruit, but salads, etc. And if we cannot produce these chemistries that you just talked about here, then we don't break down the energy, and the energy in a way explodes inside of the body, creating an opportunity for what? More disease, more disorder. So we're going to go through this rapidly. I don't want this to be an intellectual pursuit here for you. But sucrose, glucose, and fructose are important carbohydrates, commonly referred to as simple sugars. Sugar is found naturally in whole foods and is often added to processed foods to sweeten them and increase flavor. Your tongue can't quite distinguish between the sugars, but your body can tell the difference. They all provide the same amount of energy per gram, but are processed and used differently throughout the body. So the structure of a simple carbohydrate are monosaccharides and disosaccharides. We'll move on to the next. Glucose, the most important monosaccharide, the body's preferred energy source. Glucose is also called blood sugar, as it circulates into the blood and relies on the enzymes glucanase or hexanase to initiate metabolism. So when people get heavy and fat from eating sugars, what's happening? That last statement I just made there. Yeah, metabolism's not functioning. It's not working well with the metabolism. And so that's why some people look at sugar. They don't even have to eat it and they get heavy. Have you ever noticed that? Like, it's a shock sometimes. Your body processes most carbohydrates you consume, which then manifests glucose. This is used immediately for energy or to be stored in muscle cells or the liver as glycogen for later use. So that's where it stays. Remember the first part, ATP? That's reserved energy. So that stays inside of the liver, stays inside of the cell. So when a person says, I'm an athlete and I'm going to run 26 miles, you say, well, how the heck does that happen? Because your poor body's being exhausted by that output of energy. Well, the liver starts to feed it. And if you don't have this inside of the liver, you're going to have problems. So we go, elevated blood concentrations of glucose and insulin facilitate the entry of glucose into the cell. So what happens if we increase the elevation and concentrations of glucose, and insulin facilitates the entry? But we have too much insulin or we have too little insulin. What happens? It moves up and down. So that's why you see gyrations in blood sugar. And that's why most of you are hungry all the time. Because you're not eating food, you're eating substances that break down to sugar, but you're not being nourished. So you're constantly, as I was, perpetually hungry. You've never eaten anything that basically stabilizes blood sugar and feeds you. Now here's the worst one. I want you to get in detail with this because I've got to be the bad guy to tell you the good guy's the bad guy. And it's a hard job. This is really a hard job. Fructose. Now what is that? Does that mean it's a crystalline sugar that you're sitting on your table? This is what's in carrot juice. This is what's in beet juice in large amounts. This is what's in mangoes and oranges and peaches and nectarines and plums and cherries and berries. This is what it is. Now let's read. Coconuts have a minimal amount. Yeah. Fructose is a sugar found naturally in many fruits and vegetables and added to various beverages such as soda and fruit-flavored drinks. The most important study ever done on childhood obesity was published in not the New England Journal of Medicine, the British Journal of Medicine. And they basically showed that the obesity problem and plague in England, which is equal to the United States with children, comes almost exclusively from fructose they put inside of soda. Now, you would think the next step was the government of England would step in, or the government of Canada, the United States, and say, hey, by the way, we've got to stop doing that. Because if you think that it costs money to have heavy people, what do you think is going to happen when the heavy people become sick people? And it's inevitable. The heavier we get, the sicker we become, like it or not. However, it is very different from other sugars because it has different metabolic pathway and is not the preferred energy source for muscles or the brain. So all of the vegans who are telling you how wonderful fruit is, the truth is, an anatomical and biochemical truth is that your body doesn't like this as a food as much as it does even other bad sugars. Isn't that interesting? Now, we keep moving on. Fructose is only metabolized in the liver and relies on fructanase to initiate metabolism. What happens if we don't have enough of that? It is also more lipogenic. What does that mean? Or fat producing than glucose. So if you want to get chubby, eat fruit. You're going to get chubby on white sugar? Yes. You're going to do 2 to 3 times better job on fruit? Yes. So we know 2 to 3 times more chubby comes from fruit than it does from white sugar. So that's why I see a lot of vegans running around basically who are chubby because they have slow metabolism, they don't have the right ATP and different chemicals we have, and all of that converts into fat in the body. The only sugar that has ever been studied that we now definitively know converts to fat in the body is fruit sugar. Now you can get fat from eating white sugar, but it's a more elaborate process. It takes an awful lot more to do that than it does to put fruit in that instantaneously does it without any encouragement. Unlike glucose too, it does not cause insulin to be released or stimulate production of leptin, a key hormone for regulating energy into expenditure. These factors raise concerns about chronically high intakes of dietary fructose because it appears to behave more like fat in the body than like other carbohydrates. Volumes of scientific data show that fructose precipitates disease and premature aging more than any other source of sugar. Isn't that amazing? Now, how come I'm teaching this to you here in Hippocrates? How come this isn't in the national, international, scientific data banks?
Those two brothers.
Yeah, probably. And you know, I mean, I didn't want to give up fruit when I didn't know any of this. I just knew it wasn't working. It was feeding disease. And so the hardest thing I had to do after I gave up all the real bad stuff is to give up the fruit. I mean, that was really the hardest thing because that was like legal, you know, the one refuge that I had to get my drugs. Now I had to get rid of. So sucrose is commonly known as table sugar, so we know that one. Now let's look at the notorious sugars. Now after what you've learned about fructose, I want you to get this clearly into your head so you understand the data and why I'm telling you what I'm doing. So white sugar up there is 50% fruit sugar and 50% glucose. Brown sugar is the same thing, just with molasses in. And those of you that were taught by the health food industry molasses is good for you, if I wanted to get you sick, I'd give you molasses. The heaviest sprayed crop on the planet Earth is sugarcane. You think they spray other things? I'll take you out here, 45 minutes from here, and I'll show you. They spray every single day practically the sugar. Because you're a dope addict, but bugs are too. Bugs like it also. So they go after it. Dextrose, sucrose made from starch. So they actually can get that from a potato or corn. High fructose corn syrup, 55% fructose, 42% glucose for soft drinks. So look at that. So that no wonder the British Journal of Medicine was proper and correct in saying our number one cause of obesity for children is soda pop. Agave syrup. The raw food community spank their hiney because it's up to 90% fructose. The most dangerous of all sugars out there today is not white sugar. It is agave syrup. The other thing I'm going to tell you is that it's not ever raw. So if they say raw agave syrup, wrong. Wrong. No such thing. Maple syrup, 60% sucrose. Xylitol, derived from various fruits and plants. It used to be from a birch tree. Then it got too expensive, so they just use the word xylitol and they make it from any junk that they can inexpensively harvest at that point. Honey, 30% sucrose, 40% fructose. Brown rice syrup, maltose, glucose, maltodextrose. Date sugar, ground up dates, very high in fructose content, about 75%. Coconut sugar, to get your answer, 72% sucrose, 3 to 9% glucose, and a little tiny bit of fructose in that one. Now, which of these are good? None. None. That's the best one. Stevia, stevia, stevia. That's what you have to keep relying on. Now, we're just going to go through this rapidly because this is scary and boring. The same point. The 4 top most dangerous artificial sweeteners. Aspartame. Now, I'm going to go through this quickly. Aspartame was actually in our Pentagon here as a nerve destroyer. It was actually used to destroy nerves in our enemy during wartime. And I won't tell you what administration, but it was back in the 80s in this country, literally was approached, the key player of the administration. He said, we're going to make sure that you get $1 million a year consulting fee after you're not in government anymore. If you get out of the Pentagon this stuff called aspartame, and we can put it in food, and guess what happened? Although there was loud cries from legitimate science saying this is really dangerous stuff. I have a book in my library this thick, this large, about 7 pounds, that's called Aspartame Disease. The first 4 chapters start with different kinds of brain cancer. And we walk down from that one. And this is practically in everything. My mother, for instance, would always take diet soda with aspartame. And she would be washing down her cake with aspartame-rich sodas, diet sodas. And I'd say, Mom, you know, the whole objective is not to be eating cake. She said, but I'm taking a diet soda.
Yeah.
And the studies are so weird because they actually show that when they took people who on straight sodas, the bad stuff, and then diet sodas, the average weight difference is 12 pounds more for people on diet sodas. Isn't that funny? And here are some other notorious ones. This one has been around when I was a little baby, if not before, probably before. This one we've had several studies show internationally over the years as a cancer causer, but it keeps presenting itself back on the market again. So we'll go through that. Now I want you to hear this one. This is a scary, scary, scary one right here.
Aspartame is a common artificial sweetener found in over 6,000 products worldwide, especially in diet soda products. It is the most consumed artificial sweetener in the United States. With the power of slick marketing, the public has been led to believe that aspartame is safer and healthier than regular sugar. But nothing could be further from the truth. Aspartame accounts for 75% of adverse reactions to food additives reported to the FDA. The most common reaction is a headache or migraine, but many reactions are very serious, including seizures and death. Aspartame has also been linked to depression and increased weight, yet these products continue to be marketed as healthy options that support calorie restriction.
So, the other side, that's the other side there. So now we're going to talk about the pathways of sugar destruction. So we start over here. It starts with organ failure. How many of you know that just small amounts of any of these processed sugars can immediately alter the way your organ functions? Now, organ failure doesn't mean it stops completely. It's failing to do its job is what it means. And then it comes down to unused excess sugar because the body's not utilizing it. Increased sugar overload, and inevitably it starts to feed candida, which is in every one of our bodies. Now, all of us have candida, but if you're not eating properly and you're putting gasoline on the fire of the candida in the form of sugar, you're going to end up with a disorder called candida. And that's why when people are sick, it's almost unanimous. I hardly do find an ill enough person who's not also enduring candida at that point. Cancer cells have 15 times more insulin receptors. So you know that. So they love what?
Sugar.
Yeah. We also found out we had Food is Medicine conference here. Did I ever tell you about that? Where we gathered together the top scientists who were brave enough to tell the truth from universities all over this country and all over the world. And the last 2 days of May this year, we had a major conference. And in that conference, I was told by one of the most courageous scientists who wrote the Bible, the definitive book, Thomas Seifeld, the book that cancer is a metabolic disease, that he's discovered in his decades of research that cancer cells have 70 more receptor sites for fruit sugar on them than they even have for white sugar and dextrose. Isn't that scary? I just learned that in May. So now we have the outer layer, the chitin outer layer of the immune system can no longer eliminate. So it's just like your skin. If it doesn't eliminate, that's why polyester clothes, by the way. How many of you remember the 70s, how it stunk in those nightclubs? It's because people couldn't eliminate. They couldn't breathe. Same thing happens in the immune system cells. Synthetic candida becomes fungus, tumor growth occurs, and fungus at the root of the tumor and back and forth, and that's the cycle that we see. Stevia is a natural sweetener derived from stevia plant. It's literally 300 times as sweet as sugar, white sugar. So why not use that? Now, some of us are such addicts for the sugar that we're going to find we don't like the taste of the stevia. Do you follow? That's what we tend to do. Learn to like the taste because your life may depend upon this. And beside all of these scary things I'm talking about with disease, in my books I write for the scientists, I actually talk about how if I wanted to aid you, I can't do a better job than giving you a lot of processed sugar and a lot of fruit. And notice, if you know any people that are major advocates of fruit consumption, how they age a whole lot quicker than the rest of us. So here are some other things we know. We're knowing that sugar directly causes diabetes. The more and more we look at this. This is Stanford University. And then over here we realize that the hypothesis of Bradford Hill to examine associations to infer causation, as we did with smoking. Now, there's no way to really, in science, to legitimize that smoking directly caused the cancer, so what you do is a causation study. Here's a group that doesn't smoke, here's a group that does smoke, how much more cancer do they have? Just like last night, how many of you heard the cyber seminar that we did last night? Well, once a month I do that with The Real Truth About Health, and we talked about Dr. Esselstyn's latest study that he talked about with me when we were making a presentation in Europe at a medical school about a month ago. And Stephen, my colleague, reminded me of something that really stunned me, because I listened to this and it stunned me then, but it stunned me the second time. He took 200 people, and the attrition rate was something like 25 of the people. So 175 people adhered to the plant-based diet. And then he differentiated the people, the 25 or 28 people that didn't stay on the diet, and who had strokes and who had heart attacks. In the group that 100% adhered, 175 people, only one person had a problem. In the group that didn't, the small little group, about a quarter of who didn't do it, 66% of them did. And when you do a study like that, it should be the end study. There should never be another study necessary in the history of humanity, by the way. That's it. That's a study. Since 1990, the World Health Organization has recommended that intake of free sugars should be less than 10% of the total energy. Free sugars are sugars that are added to foods by manufacturing, cooking, or consuming them. These also include honey, syrups, fruit juices, and fruit concentrates. Now, fruit juices sound like a great idea compared to a soda, and I guess they are in organic fruit juice, but what we do the rare time we take that, and when I travel I do this often, I'll buy a bottle, it would take me 10, 15 days to finish the bottle. I'll put this much fruit juice and that much water. So it's 95% water, and you taint it. And believe it or not, at first you hate the taste of it because it tastes like watered down fruit juice. Then try a month later to drink fruit juice and watch what happens. It's like somebody punches you in the nose. It's just overwhelming to have that much sugar if you're not used to it. Based on new research, health professionals now recommend a stricter approach, less than 5%. And that's Newcastle University. Osteoporosis, direct links. Again, definitive work. There's nobody in their right mind other than people who advocate selling sugar to you that would deny this. If people eat sugar, they're going to have more osteoporosis. Why? Let's go back again and make this real simple. The same thing that decays the teeth decays the spine. Do you get that? Same exact thing. It's the same. It's hard tissue. It's the same exact thing. And what kind of sugar again? How about if you drink too much organic fruit juice?
Still sugar.
Even if it's ripe.
Still sugar.
How about if it's not ripe? It's going to probably be 2, 3, 4, or 5 times worse for you. Studies have shown that consuming excessive quantities of sugar, processed and refined sugars such as sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, cause a large urinary calcium excretion increase. So what they did is they took groups, real simple. Here are groups that are drinking it. Here are groups that are not drinking it. And they saw shockingly high amounts of calcium coming out of the urine. And the only difference was what? Sugar. The only difference. This is not surprising since sugar is a highly acidifying food. Heart disease, this is the most shocking one. Other than cancer, this is the most shocking because even today, other than in Canada, more people die of heart disease than they do cancer. Now very soon in this country, this year, next year, we're going to die of more cancer. So it's creeping up. But the fact is, we're about even at this point. Over the course of a 15-year study, participants who took in 25% or more of their daily calories as sugar were more than twice as likely to die from heart disease. Now you would think you would know that. Why would I be telling you this? Why isn't that taught in our school systems? Why don't they say, by the way, most people eat 30 to 40% of their diet is processed sugar. We're telling you that if you eat less than what the average person does, only 25%, you have double the chances of dying of a heart attack. Okay. Is that the first time all of you heard that? Okay, well, one person out of the entire group. One person. Think about that. Now, this is scary stuff. So let's go on with this one. As those who diet include less than 10% added sugar, overall the odds of dying from heart disease rose in tandem with the percentage of sugar in the diet, and then was true regardless of person's age, sex, physical activity level, and body mass index. So that means if you have no cholesterol, if you weren't obese, if you were an exerciser, if you had a great attitude and didn't have stress, you had the even amount of having a heart attack just by eating sugar than a person who was a couch potato sitting there and clicking a TV. Now that's profound. And that's not like maybe, wow, this is exciting stuff. This is like profound information. But again, the media is controlled by the evil empire, not controlled by truth. I can tell you that now. Sugar-sweetened beverages such as sodas, energy drinks, and sport drinks, worse than sodas, by the way, are by far the biggest sources of added sugar in the average person's diet. They account for more than 1/3 of the added sugar we consume as people. Other notorious sources include cookies, cakes, pastries, and similar treats. Fruit drinks, ice cream, my old favorite. Frozen yogurt, that's sort of like, you know, the health-minded guys to get it. You know, it's like most of these commercial yogurts are 50% sugar, just like the baby food. That's why you like it so much. And this is Harvard Medical School telling us this. Now that's cancer. So if you've never seen that picture, if you didn't get to Anna's class, that's what cancer looks like. And when these little babies come out here, how cancer tumors grow is they take stem cells. Cancer is literally a child molester. And I mean this. This is a literal statement. This is not me making something up or embellishing it. Because I'm Irish, you would think that. But the fact of the matter is, full-grown adult cells are smart enough not to get into the car of the cancer. With a little 12-year-old girl, 12-year-old boy, I'm the cancer guy, I come up in the car and say, come on, little sweetie, come into the car, I'm going to give you some candy. And the 12-year-old says, oh, that sounds good, I'll get in the car. That's the stem cell. Because the stem cell is this adolescent cell that's just really naive, doesn't know what it wants to be part of something. So it goes and gets sucked up into this tentacle, and up, halfway up, it starts to spin in a counterclockwise manner and starts to contribute to tumor masses. And so how cancer grows is with this process. Now, once again, wind back to what I said 12 minutes ago. That now we know that cancer cells have 70 more receptor sites for fruit sugar than they have for anything else. So what happens if I increase my fruit sugar, and now the stem cell has fruit sugar in it, fructose in it? Do you think it's actually more desirable for the child molesting cancer to pull over and get that one than it is the other one? So here's another avenue to why we make these things grow in our body.
What about wine?
Oh, wine's right at the top of the list of sugar. Right at the top of the list. That's why one of the things we say to you when we see high cholesterol, vegans come in here who have high cholesterol, and almost all of the time we crack you. You say, oh, they know we're boozing. Because we say, hey, you're drinking wine. Because we know they do everything else right. They're drinking wine. They have high cholesterol. Because again, fruit sugar turns into fat. It's the only sugar we know that turns into fat. Numerous important findings show that cancer cells can readily metabolize fructose and to increase proliferation. This has major significance for cancer patients given dietary fructose consumption, which indicates that efforts to reduce refined fructose intake or inhibit fructose mediation action will disrupt cancer growth. This is the University of California, Los Angeles, one of the most important centers of research in cancer in the world. So isn't it interesting? Now they're all coming around with this stuff. That's what cancer looks like eating sugar. So you know that. Let's go back so you get a really good picture of it. It's exactly what cancer looks like at the time it's eating sugar. So the next time you're tempted, visualize that. Just a little bit of sugar in my tea. Nope. Cut her hand off. Scary stuff. Huntsman Cancer Institute in Utah, another reputable, very grounded one, after extensive research published in 2009 in the Academy of Science, it has been known since 1923 that tumor cells use far more glucose than normal cells. So 1923, when is it now? 91 years ago? We knew this stuff. And how come we haven't applied this stuff? Because the powers that be have a lot of money. That's what I can tell you. They have a lot of money, and they don't like the truth. Because the truth doesn't make what? Sugar and Cancer, 2012, Journal of Molecular System Science and Biology, reports a study. Depriving cancer cells of glucose activates a metabolic and signaling amplification loop that leads to cancer cell death as a result of the toxic accumulation of reactive oxygen species. That means you cut out the sugar, what happens? Cancer dies. Now, it's not as simple as every case 100% of the cancer dies. But what it means is every case, cancer is dying when you take away the sugar. Fruit, its juices, and all other forms of sugar cause inflammation throughout the body, leading to the development and metastases of every form of cancer. These findings were published in the October 2011 Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism. This was a German study. Cancers are so sensitive to sugar supply that cutting the supply will suppress the disease. The Cancer Institute of Germany. Probably one of the top on the planet Earth. Again, another picture of, this is literally cancer that you're seeing there. How many of us have cancer in our body? Everyone. I have cancer in my body. The reality is it develops into cancer when it gets out of hand. Remember that. How many of you ever cure cancer? Nobody put your hand up. Nobody cures anything. You put it into what?
Remission.
So what the doctors are saying here in a very simple way, go back again. They're saying what we've been teaching here for 60 years. That literally you don't cure something, you cut off the supply of the disease causer. If you have bad guys and criminals, how do you get rid of the criminals? You get rid of them. You put them in jail, you get rid of them. This is the problem. The whole way we look at it now is if you have a problem, let's kill it, rather than let's prevent it. Let's prevent it. Sugar and breast cancer. Dr. Horner states that insulin is no friend to breast cancer. This is scary stuff. This I only learned about 2-3 years ago. Both normal breast cells and cancer cells have insulin receptors. When insulin attracts to these receptors, or attaches to these receptors, it has the same effect as when estrogen attaches to them, causing cells to divide. So this means you have a double concern, because over 90% of breast and prostate cancer is high estrogen levels. Now, does that mean you're taking estrogen? It means everything that you're wearing, everything you're eating, all pesticides, all plastic, all fungicide, all the garbage that man makes looks, for some reason, like estrogen to the body. I have too much estrogen in my body, and I live like a saint. I take a sauna 20 to 30 minutes, 365 days a year. I exercise radically, 6 days a week. I eat like a saint. I hardly eat much food. I drink a lot. And I have too much estrogen in my body. Now, what happens if you don't do all of those things? And then what happens if on top of that I put sugar on top of that, including organic fruit? What happens?
Estrogen goes up.
This isn't a very cheery class, is it? I know. That's why you needed this class. It's Hanukkah and Christmas and New Year's. You know, what are you going to toast with water? What are you going to give out? Nothing.
So how can you reduce estrogen?
You can reduce it by everything I just told you. Taking saunas, eating this way, exercising, sweating it out, putting it out, getting rid of the sugar, you know. So now what we know from Dr. Horner's brilliant, brilliant work is scary. It's the scariest thing I know about cancer now, let me put it that way. So if you don't understand how frightening this sounds. Not only are we saying that most cancers are coming from high estrogens, which you can't avoid practically. Now we're also saying that all forms of sugar, and the top of them being fruit, literally is doing the same exact thing. It's splitting and dividing cells to perpetuate more what? So that's why you're seeing over 50% of us will contract cancer in our life. And it's going to go to 60%. It's going to go to 70% because nobody's putting the brakes on. And Hippocrates is sitting here yelling and screaming about all this stuff. And I'm getting data and science from top universities and researchers, some of the top in the world, and nobody's listening to this stuff. Because we're the quacks.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? This is scary. This I don't know we can help. I think we can minimize, but I don't think we can actually eradicate this problem. So the Harvard Medical School found that teenage girls who consume high amounts of carbohydrates and simple sugars during their teens, obviously, have a significantly higher incidence of breast cancer later in life. Now, somebody would say, well, you can correct that. I don't know so. When you have in developmental years, you've created a epigenetic disposition. Not a genetic, but an epigenetic disposition. The body is more apt to contract cancer at that point. Now, can we minimize it? I would say yes. How much? I don't know. It could be minimal. It could be a lot. I don't know that. But I do know one thing, that if you've eaten, and I don't know any girl except my children who didn't eat potato chips and didn't eat potatoes and didn't take sodas and didn't eat candy and didn't eat ice cream and didn't eat cake and didn't eat cookies. Matter of fact, most girls that I knew watching my children's friends growing up literally wouldn't eat anything to stay thin but eat a cookie once in a while or eat a cake once in a while. That's the only thing they'd eat because they were watching their weight. Like my mother with the diet soda eating cake. This is how crazy we are. We're completely nuts out of our mind. Smoldering inflammation in tumor microenvironments have many tumor-promoting effects. UCLA again, published in the journal Cancer Research states, cancers can use fructose just as readily as glucose to fuel their growth. Additionally, pancreatic cancer cells use the fructose to help tumors grow more quickly. Why not? Because the pancreas is the one that plays with the sugar. So I predict that most people die rapidly from pancreatic cancer because they don't give up every single drop and ounce of sugar. We have had guests come here with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and bring about their own recovery. Okay? Guess what? Now after I started to learn all of this, I said, wow, these were really adherent people. They listened to every word we said and they feared death so much they just took this serious. Does that mean it's that simple? I don't think so. That if you cheat, that everyone's going to die with these things? But I will say this definitively, if you do cheat, you have a much higher chance of dying. No question about that. That's like common sense easy. I can't tell you statistically that that's going to happen, but I can promise that to you. Because everyone I know that really brings about their own recovery does it because they're purist. Not because they're partial pure. It's like a good friend of mine many years ago got well on the program, not of cancer, but of arthritis, crippling, in a wheelchair arthritis. And she started not to be well. And I was working with her by phone every third or fourth day, and I kept saying, my God, what's going on? The program's not working. I was a young guy, maybe 30 at the time. And then she finally said to me after 2.5 months, but by the way, I do this 5 days a week, and I'm so well now that on weekends I went back to my old lifestyle. I said, you are. I used to think you were the most intelligent woman I knew. I think you're the dumbest woman I knew now. I said, now let's go really slow here. How did you get well? And dead quiet on the phone. She said, yes. Okay, no more weekends. 2 months later, back the arthritis gone again. And by the way, died at 98 years old. She had just played 18 holes of golf and was getting into swim and collapsed and died. That's the way I want to die. Nobel laureate shows cancer is metabolic. Otto Warburg, 1924, paper on metabolism of tumors, clearly defined that the fermentation of sugars replace oxygen, provoking mutagenic effect. This research group that I had here, guess what they all are doing now? They're saying, wow, Warburg was a genius. 90 years later, they're finding the same thing Warburg found in 1921, 22, 23, and 24. He stated, cancer growth is caused when cancer cells convert glucose into energy without using oxygen. It's anaerobic. So cancer cells, these bad guys, these child molesters, are anaerobic. They don't like oxygen. And so Warburg, to make this simple English, it's not exactly scientifically correct, but if you had enough oxygen in your bloodstream, this is scientifically correct, you couldn't have cancer. So if we had a way, and there's no way we'll ever do this because it's impossible, we could take 100 trillion cells, pump them up with enough oxygen, you'd instantly be able to reverse every disease. Because viruses don't like it, and bacteria don't like it. They're anaerobic. So all the bad guys don't like oxygen, and all the good guys love oxygen. Do you follow? So what's one of the important reasons to exercise now? Bingo. What's one of the important reasons I pull you out here even when it's a little cool to breathe fresh air, rather than in Wigmore Hall, which is pretty clean and pretty nice, but not out here. You know. And why I demand, I mean, as I say, and I can't say it enough, you cannot be healthy without exercise. You could eat like me, you could be the most positive person in the world, you could do everything else. You do not exercise, you cannot and will never be healthy. And so as soon as you gain enough inner strength and perseverance, the first thing you have to do is start moving. Even if you're weak, move some. Get into a pool. Do something. Because if you're not, I spent 8 weeks going through literature that scientifically defined the pathways of these diseases. I found overwhelming, or at least good, support to show each of these diseases have a connection to sugar consumption. ALS, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. As Anna-Maria says so wisely to you, Alzheimer's is phase 3 diabetes. Okay? HIV. If you take people with HIV and viral diseases off sugar, and you take people with hepatitis C, a viral disease, off it, I promise you they have a good shot at living. If they do everything I tell you, exercise, have a good attitude, eat this food, and still eat sugar, they may croak. Now, you should know this because up until recently, and that's scary to me too, and I'll explain that to you, 75% today of people that have cirrhosis of the liver get it from drinking. 25% never drink. They get it from eating sugar. Do you realize if you had said to me and everyone else 15 years ago, how do you get cirrhosis of the liver? Drink. It's so scary. It's sugar. People who never drink, never took a drink in their life. 25%. It's going to go to 30%, 40%, because we're completely nuts with sugar at this point. Look at this.
What about autoimmune?
Well, here, chronic fatigue syndrome. That's it.
Oh,
That starts with a fibromyalgia. Okay, Crohn's, diverticulosis, leaky gut syndrome, asthma, chronic lung, candida, fungus, yeast. Wow, they should be at the top of the list, by the way. Right there. Mental illness. Yes. You know how many people I've seen that weren't completely bonkers, but somewhat bonkers? That we get the sugar out, and guess what? All at once they're starting to think clear. I know when I ate sugar as a kid, I couldn't sit in class. Why do you think I took drums up? I was banging on everything because all I ate was sugar as a child. You know, the poor nuns. Now settle down, Brian, in the back there. Bang, bang, bang. Okay. Dyslexia, ADD, which I don't believe is a disease, by the way, brain fog, infertility, sterility, impotency, acne, rosacea, psoriasis, eczema, menopause, andropause, premature aging, youth and adult delinquencies. Do you know how many studies have been done on that? That they pull sugar out on delinquents, and there's an attrition rate that's something like 85% better, 90% better. The kids don't become or don't continue to be crooks because it's a dope. It skews everything in your whole head. It skews everything. You know, people don't realize that this is probably the narcotic that governs human ignorance. This is the narcotic that governs human ignorance. I believe that we have everything from murder to rape to war to hatred to racism to sexism in some way or in a great way, or in part because we're addicted to this substance. I think, you know, as many wars as we have now, take sugar away from a country and watch what happens. They come in with vengeance to another country and take it over to get the sugar at this point. It's like crazy. Proper fuel. 2 moderate green salads will provide enough glucose as a fuel to the cell for a 200-pound, 90-kilo person. So this, well, what am I going to do? I have to eat a mango to get my sugar. You eat a mango, you're probably getting enough sugar for 4 days. Do you follow? You need to eat salad.